Hello there and welcome back to the Sleep Science. You stand beneath a sky that never quite goes dark. The horizon hums with sodium lamps, LED billboards flicker like restless stars, and somewhere in the distance a delivery truck sighs to a stop at 2:17 a.m. The night feels thinner than it once did, stretched like a bed sheet pulled too tight. You can almost sense your ancestors squinting at this brightness, clutching their campfires and wondering why you're voluntarily sunbathing at midnight. And here's the cheeky reality check. You probably won't survive this, at least not unchanged, because your biology was never designed for a 24-hour convenience store glowing outside your window. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're drifting off from, whether it's a quiet village at 9:43 p.m. or a buzzing city at 1:12 a.m. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying in bed, but the room is not fully dark. There's a faint blue glow leaking from a charging cable, a standby light blinking patiently, maybe the street lamp outside sketching pale stripes across your ceiling. Your eyelids flutter, and somewhere deep inside your skull, a cluster of neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus is trying to interpret what all this brightness means. Is it dawn? Is it dusk? Is it some new confusing twilight invented by humans who refuse to log off? For most of your species' history, night was decisive. And when the sun vanished, darkness arrived with authority. Firelight flickered, yes, but it was warm, dim, and unreliable. Anthropologists estimate that before widespread artificial lighting, average sleep duration may have hovered around 9 to 10 hours in winter months. Historians still argue whether pre-industrial people truly slept longer than you do, or whether diaries simply romanticize the past. But one thing is clear, their nights were darker, profoundly darker. Then came a slow revolution, first oil lamps, then gas lights lining city streets in the 19th century, and finally in 1879, Thomas Edison patented a practical incandescent light bulb, a mainstream historical milestone that quietly rewired human existence. With a filament glowing steadily inside glass, night stopped being an obstacle. It became optional. One you can almost feel the shift. Factories extend their hours, newspapers print later editions, cafes linger open. The phrase "burning the midnight oil" morphs from poetic metaphor to literal instruction. The industrialized world begins to measure productivity, not by the sun, but by the clock. And the clock, unlike the sun, does not care if you are tired. There's a strange irony here. Electric light was celebrated as a triumph over darkness. Cleaner than gas, safer than candles. Yet some Victorians feared it might cause insomnia or even madness. A few fringe pamphlets warned that bathing the brain in artificial light would overstimulate the nerves. Dramatic? Absolutely. Entirely wrong? Maybe not. Sometimes the paranoid uncle at the dinner table stumbles onto a point, even if he wraps it in theatrical doom. You roll onto your side. When the mattress sighs, your phone rests face down, but you know it's there, like a tiny lighthouse promising notifications. Blue light, especially in the 460 to 480 nanometer range, suppresses melatonin, the hormone that whispers to your body, it's time. The pineal gland nestled deep in your brain releases melatonin in response to darkness. True darkness, not dimmed screen at 30% brightness darkness. Actual primordial dark. Your ancestors didn't need blackout curtains. They had the Milky Way. Imagine yourself 20,000 years ago, lying near a fading fire. The air cools rapidly. Crickets pulse in rhythmic waves. Without light pollution, the stars are shockingly vivid, almost intrusive. You feel small under them. Your eyelids grow heavy not because you scheduled sleep, but because the environment gently insists. There is no streaming platform asking if you're still watching. You are. You always are. Now return to your present bedroom. The hum of electricity replaces the crackle of wood. The temperature is climate controlled. The mattress engineered. The pillow optimized. And yet sleep feels more fragile. Scientists have observed that even low levels of ambient light, like a television left on, can reduce time spent in deep sleep. Your body remains slightly alert, as if waiting for a sunrise that never quite commits. Over time, this subtle alertness accumulates. You call it being a bit tired. Your biology calls it circadian misalignment. Circadian rhythms are roughly 24-hour cycles driven by internal clocks synchronized to environmental cues, primarily light. When those cues become erratic, late-night scrolling, irregular schedules, or glowing ceilings, your internal orchestra loses its conductor. Instruments drift, the melody wobbles. And here's where the new phase begins to whisper. You are part of the first generations in human history exposed to pervasive artificial light from infancy. Streetlights outside nurseries, tablets in strollers, LED toys blinking cheerfully at bedtime. No other species has engineered its own sunset delay quite like this. Even nocturnal animals evolved for darkness. They didn't invent fluorescent forests. There's a gentle absurdity to it all. You evolved over hundreds of thousands of years under predictable cycles of light and dark. Then, in barely over a century, a blink in evolutionary time, you decided night was negotiable. It's like training for a marathon your entire life and then signing up for synchronized swimming. Admirable confidence, questionable preparation. Some researchers suggest that humanity may be entering a transitional sleep era. Average sleep duration in many industrialized nations has declined over the past century, though estimates vary. Surveys show many adults now report sleeping less than 7 hours per night. Yet at the same time, awareness of sleep's importance has skyrocketed. You track it, optimize it, discuss it on podcasts while ironically staying up too late to listen. The night outside your window glows faintly pink from city haze. Clouds reflect urban light back downward, amplifying brightness. Astronomers call it sky glow. You might call it insomnia's accomplice. But you're not powerless here. Your brain is exquisitely sensitive, yes, but also adaptable. When you dim lights in the evening, your melatonin rises. When you keep a consistent sleep schedule, your circadian rhythm steadies. When you step outside in natural morning sunlight, even for 10 minutes, you anchor your internal clock with surprising precision. The system still works. It's just overwhelmed. And so you lie there suspended between two eras, one foot in the ancient savanna, one in the neon city. Your biology remembers the campfire. Your habits adore the screen. Historians still argue whether earlier societies truly slept more soundly than you do, but few dispute that darkness once held more authority. The fan hums softly now. Your breathing slows. Outside, the electric night continues its steady glow, patient and persistent. You are living through a subtle experiment, one no ethics board approved, one conducted across billions of bedrooms simultaneously. My human sleep may indeed be entering a new phase, not a dramatic mutation overnight, but a gradual drift shaped by photons and productivity, by convenience and curiosity. And you right now are both participant and observer. Your eyelids grow heavier as you consider this. The light outside hasn't vanished, but perhaps it doesn't need to. Perhaps awareness is the first small step back toward balance. After all, you can't unplug the planet, but you can at least dim your corner of it. The glow outside your window would bewilder your Paleolithic self, but it didn't appear all at once. You move backward through time now, watching the night evolve in slow, flickering increments. First comes the campfire, contained lightning, coaxed into obedience. Fire doesn't erase darkness, it negotiates with it. The circle of light is small, warm, intimate. Beyond it, shadows breathe and shift. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups, such as the Hadza of Tanzania, have found that evening light levels around campfires are remarkably low compared to modern indoor lighting, often less than 10 lux. By contrast, your living room can glow at 200 to 500 lux without you even noticing. That difference matters. Firelight, rich in longer red wavelengths, has minimal effect on melatonin production. Your ancestors could gossip, tell stories, even engage in a little prehistoric stand-up comedy without completely confusing their internal clocks. Granted, the punchlines were probably about mammoths. You imagine yourself there, sitting cross-legged, smoke curling upward, sparks float into a sky dense with stars. Conversation slows naturally as the fire dwindles. There's no algorithm serving you one more thing. There is only wood turning to ember and eyelids growing heavy in sympathy. Then agriculture arrives, and with it, more structured days. Early farmers rise with dawn and often retire soon after dusk, especially outside harvest season. Mainstream historians note that in many agrarian societies, work rhythms closely track daylight hours. Candles and oil lamps exist, yes, but they're expensive and labor-intensive. A tallow candle might burn for only a few hours, and producing it requires animal fat, effort, resources. You don't waste that on binge-watching ancient pottery tutorials. Still, light slowly strengthens its foothold. In ancient Rome, wealthy households use oil lamps more liberally. In medieval Europe, monasteries keep vigil with candles for late-night prayers. There's even a quirky medieval belief that certain herbs placed near a lamp could ward off night vapors, thought to cause illness. A charming mix of proto-science and superstition. People sensed that night carried something mysterious in its air. But illumination remains scarce enough that darkness retains dominance. You don't flood entire cities with light. You carve small islands in a vast black sea. The real shift begins in the 18th and 19th centuries with urbanization. Gas lighting transforms city streets. London's Pall Mall becomes one of the first streets lit by gas in 1807. For the first time, you can stroll after sunset without clutching a lantern. Shops stay open later. Social life stretches. Darkness retreats from public space. Yet gaslight flickers and hisses. It smells faintly metallic. It's bright, hot but not relentless. Then electricity arrives. Steady, scalable, obedient at the flick of a switch. When Edison and others refine incandescent bulbs in the late 19th century, night undergoes something closer to conquest. By the early 20th century, electrification spreads rapidly through industrialized nations. Factories operate in shifts around the clock. The concept of night shift becomes normal. You are no longer tied to sunrise for productivity. Time zones are standardized. An 1884 International Meridian Conference establishes global time coordination, so trains and telegraphs can run on precise schedules. Your relationship with the sun loosens. Your relationship with the clock tightens. Historians still argue whether industrialization improved sleep consistency by enforcing schedules or degraded it by overriding natural rhythms. Did rigid bedtimes help regulate rest, or did they simply compress it? The debate hums quietly in academic journals, probably written at 1 a.m. under fluorescent lights. You feel the tightening in your own life. Alarm clocks become cultural icons. The mechanical bell on your bedside table in the early 1900s doesn't care how you slept. It rings because the factory whistle will blow. And later, your smartphone alarm, gentler, perhaps chirping like digital birds, serves the same master, the timetable. There's a slightly absurd twist here. For millennia, humans feared the dark for predators and spirits. Now you fear oversleeping and missing a meeting. The evolution did not see that plot twist coming. Electric light doesn't just extend day, it fragments it. Evening activities multiply. The invention of radio, then television, then the internet layers stimulation onto illumination. In 1938, when Orson Welles broadcasts The War of the Worlds, some listeners reportedly panic, believing aliens have landed. Imagine being jolted awake by Martians, not because they arrived, but because you left the radio on too late. Sleep meets mass media, and the boundary blurs. By the mid-20th century, suburban homes glow softly through curtained windows. Streetlights line neighborhoods. Children grow up never seeing a truly dark sky. Astronomers begin noting increasing light pollution as early as the 1970s, concerned not just for stargazing, but for ecosystems. Sea turtle hatchlings, for instance, she can become disoriented by beachfront lighting, crawling toward hotels instead of the moonlit ocean. It's not only you whose biology feels the shift. You stretch under your blanket and consider how casually you flip switches. Light is cheap, abundant, almost invisible in its impact. Yet each photon at night nudges your circadian system, whispering, "Stay awake, just a little longer." There's a fringe but fascinating tidbit from the early 1900s. Some physicians experimented with light baths, exposing patients to bright electric light as therapy for mood disorders and fatigue. They sensed light's power. though they didn't fully grasp the hormonal pathways involved. Today, light therapy is indeed used to treat seasonal affective disorder, proof that illumination can heal as well as hinder. The tool isn't evil, it's simply potent. And so you move through centuries of invention, watching the night grow brighter, busier, louder. Each step seems reasonable. Safer streets, longer productivity, entertainment on demand. None of it feels like a betrayal of biology. It feels like progress. Yet here you are, centuries later, counting sheep that probably have Wi-Fi. You sense the cumulative effect now. From campfires to candles, gas lamps to LEDs, every innovation nudged your bedtime a little later. Not dramatically at first, just a candle's worth, then a bulb's worth, then a backlit screen's worth. 1,000 tiny delays layered across generations. And your brain, exquisitely ancient, does its best to keep up. The fire once faded on its own. Now you must choose to dim the lights. The sun once dictated your rhythm. Now you negotiate with it, and you often unsuccessfully. As you lie there, the story of illumination feels less like a straight line and more like a tide steadily rising. You adapted once to harness fire. You adapted again to cities. The question humming beneath your pillow tonight is whether you are adapting still, or whether you are drifting slightly out of sync with the very star that shaped you. The fan continues its soft rotation. Somewhere, a porch light clicks on. Somewhere else, a factory shift changes. The night remains awake, even if you are trying not to be. And the journey from campfire to light bulb keeps glowing behind your closed eyes. The light bulb glows steadily now, but it's the clock that begins to rule you. You feel it in the tightening of mornings. Before industrialization, time is local and slightly fuzzy. Where noon is when the sun stands highest, not when your phone insists it's 12 o'clock. Villages operate on shared rhythms, bells ringing for prayer, roosters declaring dawn with questionable punctuality. There is structure, yes, but it breathes. It flexes with seasons. Then factories arrive and breathing room narrows. In the late 18th and 19th centuries, as textile mills and steam-powered plants multiply across Britain and later the United States, work shifts demand precision. A loom does not care if you stayed up late pondering the stars. It requires hands at a specific hour. Factory whistles slice through morning air before sunrise, summoning workers into brick buildings lit artificially from within. For the first time on a massive scale, humans work through darkness, not by necessity, but by design. A mainstream historical fact anchors this shift. In 1847, Britain passed the 10 Hours Act, limiting women and young persons to 10-hour workdays in textile mills. It was considered progressive reform. 10 hours. And that didn't include commute time, household chores, or the mental load of 19th century existence. You imagine crawling into bed exhausted, only to rise again at a fixed hour dictated not by sunlight, but by industry. Historians still argue whether pre-industrial peasants actually enjoyed more flexible sleep than factory workers, or whether rural life was simply grueling in different ways. But one pattern stands out. Industrialization standardized time itself. In 1884, the International Meridian Conference in Washington, D.C. established global time zones. The world agreed, quite literally, on what time it was. You might think that's harmless, convenient even, and it is. Trains run without collision. Communication synchronizes across continents. But something subtle shifts inside you. Your internal clock, shaped by sunrise and sunset, now answers to railway timetables. The phrase time discipline appears in social history to describe how industrial societies train workers to internalize punctuality. Clocks were installed in factories, schools, public squares. You begin carrying pocket watches, eventually wristwatches, eventually tiny glowing rectangles that vibrate at 6:30 a.m. with cheerful tyranny. There's a strange comedy in it. For hundreds of thousands of years, the sun rose without consulting you. Now you rise because a device politely sings. Evolution did not anticipate snooze as a survival strategy. With industrial schedules come compressed nights. Artificial light allows you to stay up later, but fixed start times prevent you from sleeping in. The result is a gradual trimming of total sleep opportunity. Studies of industrialized nations in the 20th century show average sleep duration dipping below 8 hours for many adults. Some surveys today suggest averages closer to 7 hours or less. And yet, in the early days of electrified factories, reformers noticed something else. Accidents increased during night shifts. Workers made more errors. Reaction times slowed. Even without modern neuroscience, observers sensed that the human body resisted nocturnal labor. You can feel that resistance in yourself when you stay awake past midnight for work. There's a hollow quality to the hours after 2 a.m., a sense that your mind is wrapped in gauze. Your circadian rhythm naturally dips in alertness during the early morning hours, roughly between 2 and 5 a.m., a window sometimes called the circadian nadir. In pre-industrial settings, you would almost always be asleep then. Under factory lights, you are expected to operate machinery, a quirky tidbit from the early 20th century. Some factories experimented with brightly colored walls and increased illumination in night shifts, believing that cheerful surroundings would combat fatigue. Imagine being handed a paintbrush solution to a biological problem. Have you tried a more vibrant shade of yellow? Sleep deprivation remains unimpressed. The industrial era also births another phenomenon: social jet lag. That groggy, disoriented feeling on Monday morning after a weekend of later nights and longer sleep. The term is modern, but the pattern likely began when rigid weekday schedules clashed with more natural weekend rhythms. You experience a mini time zone shift without ever boarding a plane. Your body prefers consistency. Your society prefers productivity. As cities expand, electric streetlights make nighttime safer and more navigable. The upside is undeniable: reduced crime in illuminated areas, extended commerce, vibrant nightlife. But illumination also blurs boundaries. The psychological signal that day is done weakens. Shops remain open. Offices hum with overtime. Eventually, emails arrive at 11:48 p.m., glowing with quiet expectation. You lie in bed thinking about tomorrow's alarm. That anticipation alone can fragment sleep. MASH researchers call it anticipatory stress, the mind lightly hovering near wakefulness in case it must respond. In hunter-gatherer groups, nighttime awakenings often correspond to environmental noises or social dynamics around the fire. In your world, they correspond to calendar notifications. Historians still argue whether industrialization truly reduced total sleep time or merely redistributed it. Some evidence suggests that people in the 19th century sometimes napped or had variable patterns depending on season. But what feels different now is scale. Billions of people wake to alarms. Billions compress sleep into scheduled slots. It is perhaps the largest synchronized biological experiment in history. There's also pride in it. You celebrate busyness. You admire those who run on 5 hours? The phrase, "I'll sleep when I'm dead," circulates as both joke and badge of honor. Sleep scientists everywhere quietly clutch their data charts. And yet, beneath the humor, your brain keeps its ancient ledger. During deep sleep, growth hormone pulses. During REM sleep, emotional memories are processed. When sleep is curtailed, mood shifts, appetite hormones fluctuate, immune function wavers. None of these systems consult your quarterly targets. You can almost see two timelines overlapping: one biological, measured in circadian cycles and hormonal waves; the other industrial, measured in shifts, deadlines, and synchronized clocks. Most days they align well enough. Some days they grind. The factory whistle may be gone from your neighborhood, replaced by smartphone chimes and commute alerts. But the principle endures. You wake because the schedule demands it, not because dawn gently lifts your eyelids. And so the industrial clock tightens, not cruelly, not maliciously, but persistently. It trims margins. It standardizes variation. It teaches you to override drowsiness with caffeine and commitment. You turn onto your other side. The fan hums steadily, unlike the unpredictable crackle of a campfire. Your alarm is set. The time zone is agreed upon. The system works. The quiet question lingering in the dark is whether your biology is fully on board with the arrangement, or simply cooperating as best it can. And yet, before the factory whistle, before the standardized clock, before Edison's filament hummed to life, your nights may have been stranger than you imagine. You assume sleep has always looked like it does now. One consolidated block, ideally 8 tidy hours, lights out, unconscious, lights on. But historical records hint at something more fluid, something that would make your modern sleep app mildly confused. In medieval Europe, there are scattered references in diaries, medical texts, and literature to what scholars call segmented sleep. People described a first sleep and a second sleep, separated by a quiet waking period around midnight. A mainstream historical anchor often cited is the work of historian A. Roger Ekirch, who in the 1990s compiled hundreds of references to this biphasic pattern in pre-industrial sources. In these accounts, individuals would retire a few hours after dusk, wake naturally around midnight for an hour or two, and then return to sleep until dawn. Might imagine that rhythm. You lie down shortly after darkness falls, candles extinguished, the world outside hushed except for wind and the occasional animal call. You sink into what would likely be deep, slow-wave sleep during those first hours. Your body repairing, your brain consolidating memories of the day's labor. Then, without alarm or panic, you wake. Not jolted, not anxious, simply awake. The room is dim. Perhaps moonlight seeps through a small window. Maybe embers glow faintly in the hearth, so you sit up. You pray or reflect or whisper with a partner. Some records suggest people use this interval for intimacy, claiming conception was more likely between first and second sleep, a charming blend of observation and hopeful biology. Others read by lamplight or simply contemplated dreams. And there's even a quirky tidbit from early modern Europe. Physicians sometimes recommended this midnight waking as a healthy time for gentle activities, believing the mind was particularly clear and receptive. Imagine your doctor today advising you to wake at 1 a.m. for a thoughtful chat and then drift back off. Your productivity app would file a complaint. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was universal or more common in certain regions and seasons. Some suggest it may have been more prevalent during long winter nights when darkness stretched for 14 hours. Others propose it was less a rigid rule and more a flexible response to extended natural darkness. The debate continues, flickering like candlelight in academic halls. What matters for you, lying here in a modern bedroom? One is this. Waking in the middle of the night may not always have been considered insomnia. That realization alone softens something. In the 1990s, psychiatrist Thomas Ware conducted an experiment placing participants in extended darkness, about 14 hours per night, for several weeks. At first, they slept longer to recover from prior deprivation, but eventually many settled into a biphasic pattern, roughly 4 hours of sleep, a calm waking interval, then another 4 hours. It was as if, given enough darkness, the brain rediscovered an older rhythm. You picture yourself in that study. No screens, no streetlights piercing the curtains, just long, uninterrupted night. Your circadian system stretching into its natural range like a cat finally given space. And yet, modern life rarely offers 14 hours of darkness. Even in winter, artificial light compresses the night, so when you wake at 2:17 a.m., your mind often panics. Something's wrong, it whispers. You have a meeting tomorrow. Anxiety flares, adrenaline rises, and what might have been a gentle, wakeful interval becomes a spiral of clock watching. There's a small irony here. The more rigidly you define normal sleep as 8 uninterrupted hours, the more distressed you feel when reality wiggles. Of course, not all nighttime awakenings are benign. Chronic insomnia is real and deeply disruptive. Sleep disorders deserve careful attention, but the historical lens complicates the narrative. Perhaps some of your midnight wakefulness isn't pathology, it's variation. You roll onto your back and imagine medieval streets under starlight. No electric glow, no late-night deliveries. Not just darkness punctuated by occasional lanterns. In that environment, a waking pause might feel natural, even welcome. Today, however, that pause often meets blue light. You reach for your phone. The screen flares, melatonin recoils. What could have been a quiet bridge between sleeps becomes a detour into headlines and social media. The ancient pattern collides with modern stimulus. Sleep scientists still debate how common segmented sleep truly was and whether your biology expects it. Some argue that consolidated sleep may have been more typical in equatorial regions with shorter nights. Others suggest human sleep is inherently flexible, capable of adapting to environmental demands. The phrase lingers. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was the norm or simply one pattern among many. Flexibility may be the key. Your species has demonstrated remarkable adaptability. You've slept in trees, in caves, on ships, in skyscrapers. You've slept alone and in communal halls. In some cultures, co-sleeping remains common. In others, solitude is prized. The architecture of sleep shifts with environment, but something about the modern insistence on uninterrupted, optimized, efficiency-maximized sleep feels industrial. As if even your dreams must clock in and out on time. There's gentle humor in imagining your ancestors judging you for being stressed about a 3 a.m. awakening. "Oh no," they might say, poking the embers. "You have a glowing rectangle problem." You smile faintly at the thought. Your breathing slows again. The possibility that nighttime waking could be neutral, neither enemy nor flaw, loosens your chest. If you wake tonight, Hanasha, perhaps you simply rest quietly. No scrolling, no mental spreadsheets, just a soft acknowledgement. You are a creature shaped by long, dark nights. The industrial clock may have tightened around your days, but your biology still carries echoes of older rhythms. First sleep, quiet wakefulness. Second sleep, a pattern like waves folding onto shore. Whether humanity is drifting back towards segmentation or pressing further into compressed, consolidated sleep remains uncertain. Researchers continue to examine sleep architecture across cultures and conditions. The answers are still unfolding. For now, you lie in the dark, aware that the way you sleep has never been fixed in stone. It has always been responsive to firelight, to candles, to factory whistles. And perhaps, just perhaps, it is responding still. Beneath your skull, somewhere in a space no larger than a grain of rice, a conductor raises its baton. You don't feel it directly. There's no dramatic drum roll inside your head. But tucked within the hypothalamus sits the suprachiasmatic nucleus, about 20,000 neurons strong, quietly orchestrating your circadian rhythm. Mainstream neuroscience has mapped this tiny cluster in exquisite detail since the late 20th century, confirming what researchers long suspected. Your body keeps time internally, even without clocks on the wall. If you were placed in a cave without sunlight or devices, your body would still cycle through periods of alertness and sleepiness. In fact, early experiments in the 1960s and 70s, most famously those by French speleologist Michel Siffre, who lived underground for months, showed that humans free run on a rhythm slightly longer than 24 hours, in often around 24.2 hours. You drift a little later each day without light cues, like a watch that loses sync. That's because your internal clock relies on signals, Zeitgebers, scientists call them, from the German for time givers. The most powerful of these is light. When morning sunlight enters your eyes, a specialized retinal cells, not the rods and cones you use for vision, but intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, send signals straight to that suprachiasmatic nucleus. It adjusts your internal timing accordingly. Cortisol rises. Body temperature climbs. Alertness sharpens. You feel awake not because you willed it, but because photons hit biology with impeccable timing. At night, in true darkness, the process reverses. The suprachiasmatic nucleus signals the pineal gland to release melatonin. When your core body temperature drops slightly, blood pressure eases, muscles soften, it's less like a switch flipping and more like a dimmer sliding down. You imagine this nightly choreography as a quiet symphony. Hormones swell and recede. Genes turn on and off in rhythmic waves. In fact, the 2017 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to scientists who uncovered key clock genes that regulate circadian rhythms at the molecular level. These genes, like clock, BMAL1, PER, and CRY, interact in feedback loops, generating oscillations inside nearly every cell of your body. Every cell keeps time. Your liver anticipates meals. Your immune system cycles through peaks and valleys of activity. Even your gut microbiome appears to follow daily rhythms. You are less a single clock and more a federation of synchronized timekeepers. Historians still argue whether pre-industrial societies experience fewer circadian disruptions than you do, but biologically, your system hasn't changed much in a few centuries. The genes ticking inside you are ancient, shaped under skies without LEDs. And yet, here you are scrolling at 11:38 p.m., telling your suprachiasmatic nucleus a very confusing story. Blue-enriched light, common in modern screens and LED bulbs, is especially effective at suppressing melatonin. Even modest exposure in the evening can delay its release. You might not notice the shift immediately, but over days and weeks, bedtimes drift later. Wake times, fixed by alarms, do not. The result is a quiet erosion of sleep opportunity. There's a quirky fringe theory that humans might one day evolve shorter sleep needs to accommodate modern life. It sounds heroic. Future you thriving on 5 hours effortlessly. But evolutionary change operates over thousands of years, not quarterly business cycles. And while rare genetic mutations do exist, such as a variant in the DEC2 gene associated with naturally short sleep, these individuals are exceptions, not the blueprint for humanity's next upgrade. Sorry, your coffee maker will remain employed. You turn slightly, feeling the mattress cradle your shoulder. Beneath that comfort, your core body temperature is already dipping if it's evening. That drop is not accidental, it's a cue. In fact, one practical trick sleep researchers suggest is taking a warm shower before bed. It sounds counterintuitive, but as your skin warms and then cools afterward, it accelerates that temperature decline, nudging your brain towards sleep. Biology loves gradients. There's ongoing scholarly debate about how rigid or flexible your circadian system truly is. Some researchers argue it can adapt significantly to shift work or jet lag with consistent cues. Others point to mounting evidence that chronic circadian misalignment, like rotating night shifts, carries long-term health risks, including metabolic disorders and cardiovascular strain. Historians still argue whether earlier eras experienced comparable misalignment, but the scale of modern shift work is unprecedented. You feel the tension in that word, misalignment. When your behavioral schedule, when you eat, work, socialize, conflicts with your internal clock, the system strains. Late-night meals can disrupt glucose regulation. Irregular sleep timing can fragment REM cycles. It's like forcing an orchestra to play out of sync. Eventually, the music sounds off. And yet your circadian rhythm is remarkably forgiving when treated kindly. Morning light exposure, consistent sleep and wake times, dim evenings, these small anchors recalibrate the system. Even stepping outside within an hour of waking, letting natural light hit your eyes for 10 minutes, can shift your internal clock earlier. It's almost embarrassingly simple. The sun remains undefeated. You imagine ancient mornings, stepping out of a shelter into pale dawn, cool air brushing your face, no app required, just photons and breath. Now compare that to waking and immediately checking notifications in a dim room. Your brain receives a weaker light signal. The circadian baton hesitates. The day begins slightly out of tune. There's gentle humor in realizing how much authority light holds over you. You consider yourself rational, autonomous. Yet a well-timed sunrise can improve your mood more reliably than a motivational quote. Your eyelids grow heavier as you picture the suprachiasmatic nucleus glowing faintly, conducting cellular clocks like a maestro. Every evening is a negotiation between ancient genes and modern habits. Every morning is a recalibration. Human sleep may be entering a new phase, yes, but your underlying machinery remains profoundly old. It doesn't need optimization so much as alignment. The fan hums. The room dims further. Somewhere outside, a streetlight flickers. Inside, 20,000 neurons keep time with patient precision, waiting for cues that make sense. You are not broken, you are rhythmic. And rhythm, when respected, can carry you gently into the dark. You drift now into the most theatrical part of your night. Your eyelids are closed, your muscles slack, and yet your brain begins to glow with peculiar intensity. Rapid eye movement, sleep, REM, arrives like a paradox wrapped in soft blankets. Discovered in the 1950s by researchers Eugene Asarinsky and Nathaniel Kleitman at the University of Chicago, REM sleep startled the scientific world. Electrodes revealed that during certain phases of the night, the brain's electrical activity looks strikingly similar to wakefulness. In other words, you are deeply asleep, and your brain is throwing a midnight film festival. Your eyes dart beneath closed lids. Your breathing becomes irregular. Your heart rate fluctuates. Meanwhile, your skeletal muscles are largely paralyzed, a protective mechanism called atonia that prevents you from physically acting out your dreams. It's nature's way of saying, enjoy the adventure, but please remain in bed. You imagine ancient humans experiencing REM beneath open skies, dreaming under constellations unpolluted by city glow. Mainstream neuroscience confirms that REM cycles recur roughly every 90 minutes throughout the night, lengthening toward morning. This architecture appears consistent across cultures, suggesting that dream sleep is not a modern invention. Even your Paleolithic ancestors likely wandered vivid inner landscapes. But what are dreams for? Here the debate becomes deliciously unresolved. Some researchers argue that REM sleep plays a crucial role in memory consolidation, particularly emotional memory. Others propose it helps regulate mood by reprocessing stressful experiences in a neurochemically unique environment, low in stress hormones like norepinephrine. And then there are more speculative theories that dreams simulate threats to rehearse survival strategies, or that they foster creativity by forging unexpected neural connections. Historians still argue whether ancient societies viewed dreams primarily as divine messages or psychological phenomena. But scientists still argue whether REM's core function is memory, emotion, creativity, or something stranger. You can feel the strangeness when you wake from a vivid dream. The logic dissolves quickly in daylight, like mist. Yet while dreaming, it feels utterly convincing. You accept flying without question. You attend meetings without pants and somehow consider that normal. Your brain is bold at 3 a.m. There's a quirky historical tidbit. In ancient Greece, people sometimes practiced incubation, sleeping in temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, in hopes of receiving curative dreams. Priests would help interpret these visions the next morning. Imagine prescribing temple naps instead of antibiotics. It's poetic if medically unpredictable. Modern labs, of course, approach dreams with electrodes rather than incense. Brain imaging studies show heightened activity in limbic regions during REM, areas tied to emotion, while parts of the prefrontal cortex, responsible for logical reasoning, are relatively subdued. This might explain why your dream self makes questionable decisions with unwavering confidence. Critical thinking politely clocks out. You roll slightly under your blanket as if responding to a dream you can't quite recall. During REM, your brain is metabolically active, sometimes nearly as active as when awake. And yet, if someone tried to rouse you, it could be surprisingly difficult. You are immersed. There's gentle humor in knowing that while you appear peaceful, your mind might be staging elaborate dramas. To an outside observer, you are motionless. Internally, you could be negotiating with a talking otter about tax policy. REM sleep tends to increase in duration toward the latter part of the night. That means when your alarm slices through early morning darkness, it often interrupts a dream cycle. You wake groggy, emotionally tinted by fragments of narrative. The industrial clock collides again with biological timing. To sleep researchers have found that depriving someone specifically of REM sleep, waking them each time it begins, leads to a phenomenon called REM rebound. The brain compensates by entering REM more quickly and intensely once allowed. It's as if your mind insists, we are finishing this story. Historians still argue whether pre-industrial humans, with longer winter nights and fewer abrupt alarms, experience more complete REM cycles. It's difficult to know, but what is clear is that REM is not optional fluff. It appears integral to mental health. Chronic suppression of REM, through certain medications or fragmented sleep, has been linked to mood disturbances. There's also a fringe yet intriguing line of inquiry into lucid dreaming, the state in which you become aware that you are dreaming while still asleep. With some practitioners train themselves to influence dream narratives. Studies confirm that lucid dreaming correlates with specific patterns of brain activation, blending elements of REM and wakefulness. You, the dreamer, briefly step behind the curtain. Imagine that skill spreading widely in a hyper-digital age. people logging into their own dreamscapes as consciously as they log into social media. It sounds futuristic, but the capacity has likely always existed. Your ancestors may have experienced lucid moments under starlit skies, interpreting them as spiritual awakenings. And yet, even as technology advances, your REM cycles remain biologically grounded. Blue light at night can delay sleep onset, compressing total REM opportunity. Alcohol, often used as a sedative, fragments REM later in the night. Stress can intensify dream vividness or disrupt cycles altogether. The theater is sensitive to scheduling. You breathe slowly now, imagining the ebb and flow of your sleep stages. Light sleep, deep sleep, REM, cycling in graceful arcs. Not random, not chaotic, but structured. Human sleep may be entering a new phase culturally, shorter nights, glowing screens, but REM still arrives on ancient timing. The content of your dreams might now include smartphones and skyscrapers, but the architecture beneath remains primal. There's comfort in that continuity. No matter how bright the cities become, no matter how tightly the clock grips your mornings, your brain still insists on stories in the dark. It still paints images without permission. It still rehearses emotions in safety. You settle deeper into your pillow. Somewhere inside, on another REM cycle prepares its stage. The actors are assembling memories, fears, absurdities. And you, blissfully unaware, are about to attend. Now the stage lights dim, and you sink below the dreaming theater into something heavier, quieter, and profoundly physical. This is slow-wave sleep, often called deep sleep or non-REM stage 3. If REM is a flickering cinema, slow-wave sleep is a cathedral of stillness. Your brain waves stretch into long, rolling oscillations called delta waves, first clearly identified in the early days of electroencephalography in the 20th century. They are slow and powerful, like tides moving through neural tissue. You don't experience this stage as a story. You experience it as absence. If someone wakes you from deep sleep, you feel disoriented, thick with inertia. Scientists call that grogginess sleep inertia, and it's strongest when you're pulled from slow-wave sleep mid-cycle. Your brain does not appreciate abrupt curtain calls. Mainstream neuroscience shows that deep sleep is especially abundant in the first third of the night. That means those early hours, before midnight, before 1 a.m., are biologically dense with restoration. Growth hormone pulses during slow-wave sleep, supporting tissue repair and muscle recovery. Your immune system recalibrates. Synaptic connections in your brain undergo subtle recalibration. And then there is the glymphatic system, one of the most fascinating discoveries in modern sleep science. Identified in the past decade through animal studies, this waste clearance system appears to flush metabolic byproducts from the brain more efficiently during deep sleep. Cerebrospinal fluid flows through brain tissue, washing away compounds like beta-amyloid, a protein associated with Alzheimer's disease. It's not an exaggeration to say that your brain cleans itself at night. You lie there, apparently doing nothing, while an internal janitorial crew works overtime. There's something quietly heroic about that. You spend your day accumulating neural debris, byproducts of thinking, perceiving, stressing, remembering. And at night, during slow-wave sleep, your brain opens the drains. Historians still argue whether people in pre-industrial societies obtained more deep sleep due to longer nights and fewer artificial disruptions. It's difficult to measure centuries later, of course. But what researchers do know is that fragmented sleep, frequent awakenings from noise, light, or stress, can reduce time spent in slow-wave stages. Modern environments with their hums and glows may chip away at this deepest layer. You imagine ancient nights again, cool air, distant animal calls, communal sleeping spaces. Not perfectly silent, certainly not perfectly safe, but free of traffic and notification pings. The darkness was whole. Whether that translated to more slow-wave sleep is debated, but the opportunity was there. There's also a quirky historical belief from the 19th century that heavy meals before bed would weigh down sleep and make it deeper. While digestion does influence sleep patterns, the relationship is more complex than Victorian dinner logic. A massive late-night feast can actually fragment sleep by elevating metabolism and discomfort. Your body prefers moderation, Not midnight banquets. No matter how persuasive leftover cake may seem. Deep sleep is also when your brain engages in what's sometimes described as synaptic downscaling. Throughout the day, as you learn and interact, synapses strengthen. If they only strengthened endlessly, your brain would become energetically overloaded. During slow-wave sleep, some of those connections are selectively weakened, preserving important learning while trimming excess noise. It's like decluttering a closet so tomorrow's outfit is easier to find. You smile faintly at the idea that your brain tidies up while you drool slightly on a pillow. Evolution has a sense of humor, and yet slow-wave sleep declines naturally with age. Children experience abundant deep sleep. Teenagers still have plenty. But as adulthood advances, the proportion gradually decreases. Scientists continue to explore why. Is it a byproduct of brain maturation? A trade-off with other processes? Historians still argue whether earlier generations experienced the same age-related shifts in environments without electric light. But biologically, the trajectory appears consistent. Modern life introduces another variable: chronic sleep restriction. If you routinely cut sleep short, 5 or 6 hours instead of 7 or 8, your body often compensates by prioritizing deep sleep first when you do lie down. That sounds efficient, and in some ways it is. But it doesn't fully erase the cognitive and emotional costs of insufficient total sleep. You can't permanently bargain with biology by skimming the surface. There's an almost tender vulnerability to deep sleep. In this stage, you are least responsive to the external world. Your awareness dims. In ancestral settings, that vulnerability may have been buffered by communal sleeping. Someone lightly awake while others descended into slow-wave depths. Anthropologists studying some hunter-gatherer groups have observed staggered sleep patterns, ensuring at least one person remains alert at any given time. It's a gentle reminder. Humans evolved socially, even in slumber. Now many of you sleep alone, doors locked, security systems armed. Safe, yes, but isolated. Whether this shift subtly alters sleep architecture remains an open question. Historians still argue whether solitary sleep is a modern anomaly or simply one cultural variation among many. As you rest here in imagination, your body temperature dips slightly further. Blood pressure eases. Muscles release microscopic tensions accumulated from the day. And a deep sleep is not glamorous. It doesn't produce cinematic dreams. It doesn't inspire temple rituals, but it restores. And restoration may be the quiet casualty of a brightened world. When artificial light pushes your bedtime later, when alarms pull you from early cycles, when stress fractures the night into fragments, slow-wave sleep can erode. Not vanish dramatically, just thin out. A few minutes less here, a disrupted cycle there. You rarely notice it immediately. You simply feel a bit less steady, a bit less resilient. Human sleep may be entering a new phase culturally, but your need for deep, oscillating delta waves has not changed. Your neurons still crave that rolling tide. Your brain still depends on its nightly rinse. You sink further into the mattress now, when imagining those slow waves passing through you like a calm ocean swell. No screens, no whistles, no deadlines. Just the quiet, ancient rhythm of restoration, steady and patient, waiting for darkness deep enough to do its work. And then, just as your brain prepares for that deep, rolling tide, a small rectangle lights up your face. It's almost poetic, really. After millions of years of evolving under firelight and starlight, you now hold a pocket sun inches from your retinas at 11:47 p.m. No mammoth ever had to contend with push notifications. Blue light has become the unlikely villain of modern sleep conversations, though the story is more nuanced than a simple "screens are evil" narrative. Light itself is not the enemy. In fact, morning light is one of the most powerful tools for stabilizing your circadian rhythm. And the issue is timing. The cells in your retina that communicate directly with your circadian clock are especially sensitive to short wavelength blue light, roughly in the 460 to 480 nanometer range. LED screens, energy-efficient bulbs, and many modern lighting systems emit a relatively high proportion of this wavelength. During the day, that's beneficial. It promotes alertness and sharpens attention. At night, it tells your suprachiasmatic nucleus, it's still daytime. Carry on. Melatonin, the hormone of darkness, waits politely for dimness. When evening light remains bright and blue enriched, melatonin release is delayed. You may not feel dramatically different in the moment. You're just scrolling, just watching one more episode, just reading one more article about how you should sleep more. Where the irony is exquisite. Mainstream laboratory studies have shown that exposure to bright, blue-enriched light in the evening can suppress melatonin and delay sleep onset compared to dim, warmer light. Even e-readers have been studied. Participants reading on backlit devices before bed often experience later melatonin onset and reduced next morning alertness compared to those reading printed books. Historians still argue whether artificial evening light has shortened human sleep across the centuries or merely shifted it later. But never before has illumination been so portable, so intimate. Gas lamps didn't follow you into bed. Smartphones do. There's a quirky tidbit from the early days of television. In the 1950s, some critics warned that TV would steal America's sleep. At the time, programming ended at night with a test pattern. The screen literally went blank. Imagine that luxury, your entertainment politely shutting itself off. Today, the stream is endless, tailored, algorithmically persuasive. Your ancestors feared wolves at the edge of firelight. You face autoplay. But here's where the narrative deserves balance. Not all evening light is equally disruptive. Intensity matters. Duration matters. Distance matters. A dim bedside lamp with warm tones has a different biological impact than a bright overhead LED panel. The problem isn't a single photon, it's the cumulative glow. You shift under the blanket, imagining your bedroom as a cave slowly filling with artificial dawn. Even low levels of ambient light during sleep, like a television left on, have been associated in some studies with slightly higher nighttime heart rates and metabolic changes. The body remains subtly alert, as if unsure whether to descend fully into slow-wave depth. And yet technology also offers solutions. Many devices now include night mode settings that reduce blue light emission in the evening. Some homes use smart lighting that gradually warms and dims after sunset. There's a gentle irony here. You invent light that disrupts sleep, then invent smarter light to undo the disruption. Humanity forever patching its own updates. There's ongoing scholarly debate about how significant blue light's role is compared to cognitive stimulation. Is it the wavelength delaying you, or the content? After all, reading a thrilling message or doom scrolling through alarming headlines activates emotional circuits that delay sleep, independent of light exposure. Historians still argue whether earlier forms of evening stimulation, lively taverns, candlelit debates, had similar alerting effects, or whether modern digital immersion is categorically different in intensity. Perhaps it's both. Light primes the clock, content primes the mind. You consider your own habits, the reflexive check, the quick glance that becomes 20 minutes, the soft glow reflecting in your pupils. You rarely think of it as a biological intervention, but it is. Each late-night scroll nudges your internal timing slightly later, like pushing a boat gently away from shore. There's gentle humor in imagining explaining this to someone from 1700. Yes, I delayed my hormonal cascade because I needed to see what a stranger ate for dinner. They would blink at you in candlelight. But before you judge yourself too harshly, and remember, your brain evolved to seek information. Novelty triggers dopamine. Social connection matters deeply to human survival. Your devices exploit ancient drives. It's not weakness. It's wiring meeting opportunity. The question becomes one of boundaries. When you dim your environment in the evening, lower lights, warmer tones, fewer screens, you recreate in miniature the gradual descent into darkness your ancestors experienced naturally. You signal safety to your nervous system. You allow melatonin to rise without resistance. Some researchers propose that modern humans are living in a state of light pollution of the body, where circadian signals are blurred by constant illumination. Others caution that fear of blue light can become exaggerated, stressing people unnecessarily. As always, the truth likely rests in balance. Historians still argue whether we are uniquely overstimulated or simply adapting in real time. You roll onto your side, perhaps placing your phone a little farther from reach. The room feels softer when light is low. Your pupils widen slightly. Your breathing deepens. Human sleep may be entering a new phase not because light exists, but because it no longer fades on its own. You must choose dusk now. You must create sunset with switches and settings. Outside, the city glows steadily, indifferent to your circadian rhythm. Inside, you have a small sphere of influence, a lamp, a screen, a decision. The fan hums, the blue light dims. Melatonin waits patiently in the wings, ready to step forward when the stage finally darkens. And in that simple act, turning down the glow, you begin to reclaim a rhythm older than electricity itself. Or step outside now, just for a moment in your imagination, and look at the city from above. It glows. From orbit, astronauts describe Earth at night as a web of light, continents traced in gold. Urban centers blaze brightest, coastal lines shimmering like constellations brought down to sea level. This luminous network is one of humanity's proudest signatures. It signals industry, safety, connectivity. It also signals something quieter, the near erasure of natural darkness for billions of people. In 2016, a comprehensive global atlas of artificial night sky brightness revealed that more than 80% of the world's population lives under light-polluted skies. In Europe and North America, the figure climbs above 99%. For many children growing up in major cities, the Milky Way is not a familiar sight, but an abstract concept in textbooks. Historians still argue whether earlier urban centers, like ancient Rome or medieval Baghdad, experienced meaningful night brightness from torches and oil lamps. But nothing in human history compares to the scale and intensity of modern electric illumination. Entire metropolitan areas now maintain light levels through the night that rival twilight. You walk down a neon-lit street in your mind. Storefronts glow. Traffic signals pulse red, yellow, green. Billboards flash animated colors. Street lamps cast halos onto pavement. Even at 2 a.m., the environment hums with visual stimulation. Your circadian system notices. Artificial light at night doesn't just delay bedtime. It can subtly fragment sleep even after you drift off. Studies have linked higher levels of outdoor nighttime light exposure, measured via satellite data, to shorter sleep duration in urban populations. The effect isn't dramatic in a single night. It's incremental, statistical, woven into averages across millions. You might think blackout curtains solve everything, and they certainly help. But light pollution seeps in socially as well. A city that never truly darkens tends to never truly stop. Late-night restaurants, 24-hour gyms, around-the-clock delivery services, these reshape expectations about availability and responsiveness. The social clock stretches alongside the electric one. There's a gentle absurdity in ordering groceries at 3 a.m. while your circadian rhythm pleads for slow-wave sleep. Progress tastes convenient, but biology still keeps score. Urbanization also introduces noise, another subtle sleep disruptor. Sirens, traffic, distant construction. Even if you don't fully awaken, microarousals can shift you into lighter sleep stages. Deep sleep thins. REM fragments. The architecture becomes slightly less stable. A quirky historical tidbit. In the early 20th century, some cities experimented with dramatically increasing streetlight brightness to symbolize modernity and prosperity. The brighter the better became a civic philosophy. Darkness was equated with danger and backwardness. Rarely did anyone ask whether perpetual brightness might carry physiological trade-offs. The assumption was simple: more light equals more progress. Today, urban planners are beginning to reconsider. Some cities implement dark sky initiatives, directing light downward to reduce sky glow and using warmer color temperatures at night. It's a quiet acknowledgement that illumination has ecological and human costs, and the ecology matters. Migratory birds can become disoriented by city lights, circling illuminated skyscrapers until exhaustion. Insects swarm around artificial bulbs, altering food chains. Sea turtles mistake beachfront hotels for moonlit horizons. You are not the only species navigating this luminous maze. Historians still argue whether humans will adapt culturally and biologically to ever brighter nights, or whether we will deliberately reintroduce darkness into urban design. The debate mirrors a broader question: is constant availability a sign of advancement or overextension? You pause beneath a street lamp in your imagination. The light pools around you, that are crisp and white. Your pupils constrict slightly. Even at midnight, your brain receives a whisper of daytime. Back in your bedroom, that whisper lingers through thin curtains. Not enough to keep you fully awake, but enough to nudge your internal rhythms subtly later over months and years. There's also the psychological dimension. A brightly lit city invites activity. You're more likely to meet friends late, work late, exercise late. In rural settings with minimal lighting, evenings often compress naturally. The environment itself encourages rest. In urban centers, stimulation is optional but omnipresent. Of course, cities also offer benefits that can improve sleep: better healthcare access, safer housing, climate control. It's not a simple villain story, it's a trade-off. And you consider the phrase, the city that never sleeps. It's meant as praise: vibrant, alive, energetic. But biologically speaking, a species that never sleeps doesn't last long. Even dolphins, who can sleep with one hemisphere of their brain at a time, still surrender half their awareness to rest. Humans don't have that feature. You are gloriously, inconveniently all or nothing. There's light humor in imagining evolutionary updates rolling out. Version 2.0, now with hemispheric sleep mode. Until then, you remain dependent on darkness. Satellite imagery shows that artificial light at night continues to increase globally in both intensity and geographic spread. The trend line glows upward. Human sleep may be entering a new phase, not because individuals suddenly changed, but because entire environments did. Slowly, you lie back down in your mind, city sounds softened by distance. The glow outside is steady, but your room is dim enough for now. You can't switch off the skyline. You can't dim the entire grid. But you can carve out a pocket of night within it. The fan hums. Somewhere downtown, a restaurant closes. Somewhere else, a shift begins. The city pulses on, luminous and restless. Inside your small sphere of darkness, you close your eyes, an ancient act in a modern world, and let the bright web of humanity fade, just enough for sleep to find you. And then something unexpected happens. The world slows down. In early 2020, cities that once blazed through the night fall strangely quiet. Commutes vanish, office towers dim, airplanes rest on runways. For a brief, surreal stretch of time, billions of people remain home after sunset, not because of weather or war, but because of a virus. Your routines dissolve almost overnight. During the global COVID-19 pandemic, researchers begin tracking sleep patterns with surveys, wearable devices, and smartphone data. What they find is complicated. On average, many people start going to bed later, but also waking later. Without early commutes, alarm clocks loosen their grip. Total sleep time increases slightly for some populations. Social jet lag, the gap between weekday and weekend sleep timing, narrows in certain groups. For the first time in the modern era, a large portion of humanity briefly steps off the industrial treadmill. Historians will likely debate for decades how profound this period's effects were, but early sleep research offers intriguing clues. In several countries, people reported sleeping longer and experiencing fewer time pressures. Teenagers especially showed shifts toward schedules more aligned with their natural chronotypes, staying up later, waking later, yet sometimes feeling more rested. And yet not all sleep improved. Anxiety surged, uncertainty lingered. Financial stress, health fears, social isolation, these activated the very stress systems that fragment rest. Insomnia rates rose in many regions. Dreams became more vivid and bizarre, a phenomenon researchers dubbed pandemic dreams. People reported unusually detailed, emotionally intense dream content. You can almost feel that strange elasticity of time during lockdown nights. No commute tomorrow, no early meeting in person, but also no clear boundary between work and rest. Your laptop sits on the same table where you eat dinner. Watch your bedroom doubles as an office. The architecture of your day dissolves. Mainstream studies published in 2020 and 2021 observed that while some individuals gained sleep opportunity, overall sleep quality became more polarized. Those with stable jobs and safe homes often experienced modest improvements in duration. Those under high stress or precarious conditions frequently saw worsening insomnia. It was a global sleep experiment, unplanned, uncontrolled, revealing. There's a quirky, almost poetic detail. In some cities, reduced traffic led to measurably quieter nights. Seismologists even detected lower levels of human-generated ground vibrations. Imagine the planet itself noticing that you've gone to bed earlier. The Earth exhales just slightly. Historians still argue whether this brief reset will have lasting influence on work culture and sleep norms. Did remote work permanently loosen rigid schedules? Or will productivity pressures snap back tighter than before? The debate continues in boardrooms and bedrooms alike. You remember what it felt like. Perhaps waking without an alarm, sunlight already filtering through curtains. Your body choosing its own rise time. For some, that alignment with internal rhythms felt luxurious. For others, the loss of structure felt destabilizing. It revealed something essential. Your sleep is deeply entangled with social systems. When external schedules softened, many biological clocks drifted toward later timing. This wasn't laziness, it was chronotype expression. Humans naturally vary along a spectrum, some larks, some owls. Under rigid 8 a.m. start times, owls accumulate chronic sleep debt. During lockdown, some of that debt eased. But there was a trade-off. Screen time increased dramatically. Evenings stretched under the glow of streaming platforms and endless news updates. Blue light exposure rose for many. Physical activity often decreased. Sunlight exposure, especially during strict indoor periods, dropped, weakening one of your strongest circadian anchors. You lie in bed thinking about how quickly patterns can shift when the scaffolding of society changes. For decades, sleep researchers argued that early school start times conflicted with adolescent biology. Suddenly, remote learning allowed later wake times and teenagers slept more. Data supported what physiology predicted. There's gentle irony in the fact that it took a global crisis to test long-debated sleep hypotheses at scale. Some researchers propose that the pandemic marked a subtle turning point in sleep awareness. Conversations about rest, burnout, and mental health entered mainstream discourse with new urgency. Companies began experimenting with flexible schedules. The idea that productivity must begin at dawn softened, at least temporarily. Others caution that economic pressures may ultimately reinforce long hours in digital tethering. Historians still argue whether this era will be remembered as a true inflection point in human sleep patterns or merely a brief anomaly. From your pillow, it feels like both. A reminder that your sleep is not fixed, that when environmental constraints change, your rhythms respond. Given flexibility, many people's bodies shifted towards slightly later, longer sleep. Given stress, sleep fragmented. Human sleep may be entering a new phase not just because of light or technology, but because of shifting work structures. Remote connectivity blurs boundaries between professional and personal time. The office no longer dictates location, but it can infiltrate any hour. You feel that duality now, freedom and intrusion intertwined. The fan hums softly. Outside, traffic is lighter than it once was, or perhaps you've just grown used to it. Your alarm is set, or maybe tomorrow you don't need one. For a brief moment in recent history, the industrial clock loosened. Your biology stretched, curious and cautious. Whether it will tighten again or reshape itself around more flexible rhythms remains one of the quiet, unfolding questions of this new phase of human sleep. And you are living it, one night at a time. If there is one group that has been quietly protesting the industrial clock for decades, it's teenagers. You can almost see it. A 16-year-old staring at the ceiling at 11:45 p.m., fully awake while an alarm is set for 6 a.m. The problem isn't rebellion, it's biology. During adolescence, the circadian system shifts later in a phenomenon known as sleep phase delay. Melatonin secretion begins later at night compared to childhood, and the natural wake time drifts correspondingly later in the morning. This isn't laziness or defiance. It's a predictable developmental pattern observed across cultures. Puberty nudges the internal clock forward. Mainstream sleep research has confirmed this repeatedly. The studies measuring dim light melatonin onset, the gold standard for circadian timing, show clear delays during teenage years. At the same time, adolescents still require around 8 to 10 hours of sleep for optimal functioning. So when high schools start at 7:30 a.m., the math becomes unforgiving. Historians still argue whether pre-industrial adolescents experience similar phase delays in agrarian societies or whether communal living and lack of artificial light moderated the shift. It's difficult to reconstruct teenage bedtimes from medieval diaries, but biologically the shift appears deeply rooted. You imagine a medieval village at dusk. Teenagers likely stayed up talking or lingering near the fire, perhaps naturally drifting later than younger children. But without electric light, the ceiling for delay was lower. Even darkness eventually insisted. Now darkness negotiates, adds smartphones, social media, online gaming, streaming platforms, and you have a perfect storm. A biological tendency toward later sleep collides with endless digital stimulation. The result? Chronic sleep restriction. Surveys in many countries show that a large proportion of teenagers sleep less than the recommended amount on school nights. There's a bittersweet humor in adults accusing teens of staying up too late, when society itself schedules their days in opposition to their circadian wiring. It's like setting a meeting at 3 a.m. for adults and then criticizing them for yawning. In recent years, some school districts have responded. A mainstream milestone occurred when the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended that middle and high schools start no earlier than 8:30 a.m. Research from districts that shifted start times later has shown improvements in attendance, mood, academic performance, and even reductions in car accidents among teen drivers. Sleep, it turns out, influences reaction time more than motivational speeches, and yet implementation is uneven. Transportation logistics, after-school sports, parental work schedules, all entangle the issue. Historians still argue whether the early start time model emerged primarily from agricultural calendars, industrial efficiency, or simple administrative convenience. Whatever its origin, it now rubs against adolescent neurobiology. You remember being a teenager, perhaps, how alive the mind felt at midnight, in ideas blooming, conversation stretching, music sounding deeper. There's a neurological basis for that sensation. Dopamine systems are particularly active during adolescence, amplifying reward sensitivity and novelty seeking. Late-night interactions can feel electric. A quirky tidbit: some researchers have speculated that adolescent phase delay may have had evolutionary benefits. In small ancestral groups, staggered sleep timing could have ensured that someone was awake later into the night, providing a layer of vigilance. It's a hypothesis, not a proven fact, but it's an intriguing reframing. The night owl teen as ancient night watch. Of course, in modern suburbs, the only predator is probably the refrigerator light. Still, the biology persists. A chronic sleep deprivation in adolescence has been linked to increased risk of mood disorders, impaired attention, metabolic changes, and weakened immune function. The teenage brain is still developing, particularly the prefrontal cortex, the region involved in impulse control and long-term planning. Sleep supports that maturation. When cut short, the scaffolding wobbles. You lie in the dark imagining a global shift. Schools aligning with adolescent circadian rhythms. Families prioritizing wind-down rituals. Cities dimming lights earlier. It sounds utopian. It also sounds biologically sensible. But modern life complicates simplicity. Homework is assigned online. Social interactions continue in group chats long after dinner. The fear of missing out glows blue at the bedside. Historians still argue whether today's teenagers are uniquely sleep-deprived compared to those in earlier centuries, or whether youth has always hovered on the edge of exhaustion in different ways. What feels different now is scale and intensity. Digital networks amplify social life into the night, and artificial light removes the natural stopping point. And yet there is hope and awareness. Conversations about teen sleep are more common than ever. Parents discuss screen curfews. Schools pilot later starts. Researchers publish data with persuasive clarity. You sense that adolescence may be a bellwether for broader human adaptation. If a society can reshape itself to accommodate teenage circadian biology, perhaps it can reshape around adult rhythms too. Human sleep may be entering a new phase not only because of technology, but because of negotiation between biology and policy, between neurons and bell schedules. The fan hums softly. Somewhere, a teenager is still awake, scrolling under the covers. Somewhere else, an alarm is set too early. You close your eyes and consider the quiet rebellion happening every night in adolescent brains around the world. A natural delay, ancient and insistent. The clock says one thing, their biology says another, And the future of human sleep may depend on which voice grows louder. Of course, if society won't bend to your biology, there is always someone on the internet promising that you can bend your biology to society. Welcome to the world of polyphasic sleep. Instead of one consolidated block at night, polyphasic schedules divide sleep into multiple shorter segments across 24 hours. The most extreme versions, like the so-called Uberman schedule, propose sleeping just 20 minutes every 4 hours, totaling only 2 hours per day. It sounds like a productivity fantasy. More waking hours, more output, more life crammed into the same calendar. You can almost hear the pitch. Why waste 8 hours unconscious when you could be building an empire? The idea isn't entirely modern. A mainstream historical anecdote often cited is Leonardo da Vinci, rumored to have slept in short bursts throughout the day. There's also speculation about figures like Nikola Tesla or Thomas Edison favoring unconventional sleep patterns. Edison notably considered sleep a waste of time, though records suggest he still slept more than his bravado implied. Historians still argue whether these famous examples are accurate representations or romantic exaggerations. Documentation is sparse, and myth tends to inflate genius with sleepless mystique. It makes for compelling storytelling. The tireless inventor illuminated by both light bulbs and ambition. But biology is less impressed by ambition. Controlled laboratory studies consistently show that restricting sleep to 4 or 5 hours per night leads to cumulative cognitive deficits. Reaction time slows, attention lapses increase, mood deteriorates. What's more unsettling is that subjective perception of impairment plateaus. You feel like you've adapted, even as performance continues to decline. In other words, you become a poor judge of your own sleep deprivation. There's a gentle irony in trying to hack a system that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. Your circadian rhythm and sleep architecture are not simple habits. They are deeply embedded regulatory processes. Slow-wave sleep concentrates in early cycles. REM expands in later cycles. Compressing sleep into tiny fragments makes it difficult to preserve this architecture fully. That said, not all polyphasic patterns are extreme. In many cultures, biphasic sleep, one longer nighttime period plus a daytime nap, has historical precedent. The Mediterranean siesta, for instance, aligns with a natural dip in alertness during early afternoon, often called the post-lunch dip, though it occurs even without lunch. Core body temperature declines slightly during this window, making sleep more likely. The mainstream research supports the restorative power of short naps. 10 to 30 minutes can improve alertness and performance without inducing deep sleep inertia. Even NASA has studied strategic napping for pilots and astronauts, finding performance benefits from controlled rest breaks. So here's the nuance. Segmented sleep can work when it aligns with circadian biology. Radical sleep compression rarely does. There's a quirky online subculture of polyphasic sleepers who meticulously track adaptation phases, claiming that after an initial period of misery, the body learns to enter REM more quickly during short naps. Some anecdotal reports describe vivid dreams during 20-minute rest periods. Scientists remain skeptical. And while REM pressure does increase with deprivation, leading to quicker REM onset, there's little evidence that the brain can indefinitely compress all necessary sleep functions into 2 hours per day without consequences. Historians still argue whether pre-industrial humans occasionally practiced more flexible sleep patterns during certain seasons or communal watch schedules. But even then, total sleep time likely remained within biologically sustainable ranges. You imagine attempting the Uberman schedule, setting alarms every 4 hours, trying to nap at 2 a.m., 6 a.m., 10 a.m. The first days might feel edgy, almost euphoric. Sleep deprivation can produce a wired sensation. Then gradually, cognition would blur. Mood would fray. Your suprachiasmatic nucleus would protest with hormonal confusion. There's also the social dimension. Most of the world still runs on consolidated nocturnal sleep. Meetings, meals, family life, these cluster in shared waking hours. Adopting an extreme polyphasic pattern can isolate you from communal rhythms. And humans, deeply social sleepers that we are, evolved in synchrony with group patterns. Yet the appeal persists. In a hyper-competitive, always-on culture, Sleep can feel negotiable. Productivity becomes a moral virtue. Rest becomes negotiable overhead. But here's the quiet truth. When you chronically reduce total sleep, your body reallocates resources. Immune function dips, glucose metabolism shifts, emotional regulation wavers. It's not dramatic at first, it's cumulative. There's ongoing scholarly debate about how flexible human sleep truly is. Some researchers propose that under certain environmental pressures, segmented or shorter sleep could be temporarily adaptive. Others emphasize that chronic restriction carries measurable health risks. The phrase lingers again. Historians still argue whether historical sleep patterns were more variable than we assume, but biology sets boundaries. You turn on your side, grateful that tonight you are not waking every 4 hours by design. The fan hums steadily, not as an alarm, but as white noise. Human sleep may be entering a new phase culturally, pressured by productivity, optimized by apps, sliced by schedules, but your need for sufficient total sleep remains stubbornly consistent. There is freedom in that stubbornness. You do not need to conquer sleep. You need to cooperate with it. The dream of squeezing more hours from the night is seductive. But perhaps the real innovation isn't in sleeping less. It's in structuring life so that sleeping well becomes possible. And that is a far more radical idea than any 20-minute nap cycle. Now you strap a small device around your wrist, and suddenly your sleep has a score. A number greets you each morning. Maybe it's 82, maybe 67, maybe a triumphant 91 accompanied by a tiny digital celebration. Deep sleep, 1 hour 12 minutes. REM, 1 hour 48. Resting heart rate, slightly elevated. You scan the metrics before you've even stretched. Welcome to quantified sleep. Over the past decade, wearable devices, smartwatches, rings, under-mattress sensors have transformed bedrooms into data labs. Using accelerometers to detect movement and optical sensors to estimate heart rate variability, yes, these devices approximate sleep stages and duration. The technology is not perfect. Polysomnography in a clinical sleep lab remains the gold standard, but consumer trackers have improved dramatically. Mainstream validation studies show that many wearables estimate total sleep time reasonably well compared to lab equipment, though they are less precise at distinguishing between specific sleep stages. They infer patterns from motion and heart signals, not direct brain waves. Still, for millions of people, these devices provide the first tangible window into their nightly patterns. You glance at your wrist again. Did you really wake up 3 times? Was your deep sleep slightly shorter than average? The data whispers interpretations before your conscious mind has fully emerged. There's a quirky modern phenomenon called orthosomnia, a term coined by sleep researchers to describe anxiety driven by an obsession with achieving perfect sleep metrics. Patients began arriving at clinics distressed not because they felt tired, but because their trackers reported insufficient deep sleep or too many awakenings. Ironically, the pursuit of optimal sleep sometimes degraded it. You can almost hear the internal dialogue at 3:12 a.m. Why am I awake? This will ruin my score. Stress rises, heart rate ticks upward. The device dutifully records the disturbance. Historians still argue whether earlier eras experienced similar anxieties around sleep quality, perhaps framed in moral or spiritual language rather than numerical metrics. In medieval Europe, a restless sleep might have been attributed to humoral imbalance or divine unrest. Today, it's a red bar on a smartphone graph, and yet data can empower. Wearables have helped individuals identify patterns. Late caffeine intake correlating with fragmented sleep, inconsistent bedtimes reducing total duration, alcohol suppressing REM. For shift workers and athletes especially, tracking trends over time can guide meaningful adjustments. The key word is trends. Sleep varies night to night. Hormones fluctuate. Stress ebbs and flows. A single bad night rarely predicts long-term health, but a pattern of short sleep across weeks, that's useful information. You imagine ancient humans waking at dawn without any metric beyond how they felt. Tired or refreshed, no pie charts, no sleep efficiency percentages. And there's something liberating about that simplicity and something powerful about modern insight. Researchers continue debating how accurate consumer sleep staging truly is. Some argue that overinterpretation of imperfect data risks unnecessary worry. Others see enormous potential in large-scale, anonymized datasets revealing population-level sleep trends. Historians still argue whether future generations will view early sleep trackers as crude prototypes or revolutionary turning points in self-awareness. You roll onto your side and think about the relationship between measurement and behavior. When you track steps, you often walk more. When you track calories, you become mindful of meals. When you track sleep, you may prioritize bedtime. But measurement can also distort. If you chase a number too aggressively, going to bed long before you're sleepy just to extend total duration, you may lie awake frustrated. Biology resists rigid optimization. There's gentle humor in the idea that your ancestors survived predators, famine, and storms without ever knowing their REM percentage. Meanwhile, you fret over a dip from 22% to 18%. Perspective is a soothing balm, and yet human sleep may indeed be entering a new phase because of this quantification. For the first time in history, vast swaths of the population are collecting nightly physiological data at scale. Researchers can analyze anonymized trends across countries, seasons, even global events. During the pandemic, wearable data revealed shifts in bedtime and wake time with remarkable clarity. Your private rest has become part of a global dataset. There's something intimate and slightly surreal about that. While you dream, algorithms hum quietly, translating motion into metrics. Your unconscious hours feed into graphs that may influence future public health policies. The fan continues its steady rotation. Your device rests silently on your wrist, waiting for morning. The question lingers softly. Does knowing more about your sleep help you sleep better? For some, yes. Awareness encourages earlier bedtimes, darker rooms, consistent schedules. For others, the pressure to perform at sleep becomes another stressor in an already optimized life. Human sleep, once guided solely by sun and fatigue, is now guided by dashboards. And here, as promised, we slow. Imagine setting the device aside, not discarding it, not rejecting data, but loosening its grip. Suddenly your breathing deepens. The room is dim, edges softened. Outside, the city hum fades into a distant blur. You are more than a score. Your sleep is not a competition, not a productivity metric, not a daily exam to pass or fail. It is a rhythm, ancient and forgiving. Some nights run smooth as silk, others wrinkle and fold. Feel the mattress beneath you, the steady rise and fall of your chest, the faint whisper of air from the fan brushing your skin. These are older signals than any algorithm. If you wake tonight, let it be neutral. If your mind drifts, let it wander gently. Your body knows more about sleep than any graph can capture. The numbers will be there in the morning. For now, there is only darkness, soft, spacious, patient. You are allowed to rest without measuring it. Let the metrics fade. Let the room grow quieter. Let your thoughts lengthen and loosen like shadows stretching at dusk. Sleep does not require perfection. It only requires surrender. Your dreams, once fleeting and private, are no longer entirely beyond translation. In quiet laboratories lit not by moonlight but by monitors, researchers are attempting something that would have sounded like myth a century ago: decoding dream content from brain activity. You lie asleep, electrodes resting gently along your scalp, and somewhere nearby a computer hums, watching the electrical symphony of your cortex. Artificial intelligence has entered the dreamscape. Using functional MRI and machine learning algorithms, neuroscientists have begun reconstructing rough visual approximations of what people see, both while awake and, more tentatively, even while asleep. In pioneering studies from the early 2000s, researchers trained AI systems to associate patterns of brain activity with categories of images: animals, buildings, faces, text. When participants later slept in the scanner and entered REM, the system could sometimes predict, above chance, what general category they were dreaming about. Not the exact dream, not yet, but hints, silhouettes, probabilities. Mainstream neuroscience confirms that dreaming activates many of the same visual and emotional regions used in waking perception. The difference is that input flows from memory and imagination rather than from your eyes. Artificial intelligence, trained on massive data sets, excels at detecting patterns too subtle for human analysis. Combine the two, and you get something extraordinary, the possibility of mapping inner experience. Historians still argue whether future generations will view this era as the dawn of true dream decoding or merely a primitive prelude to more advanced neurotechnology. The debate echoes earlier anxieties about mind reading and privacy. After all, for most of history, your dreams were yours alone, interpreted perhaps by priests, therapists, or friends, but never algorithmically parsed. You imagine ancient Greeks sleeping in those Asclepian temples again, seeking healing visions. Now imagine a neural network quietly classifying their symbols. Probability 78%. Snake imagery. It's both impressive and slightly absurd. There's a quirky modern twist. Some researchers have combined generative AI, similar to systems that create images from text prompts, with brain imaging data to approximate dream visuals. The reconstructions are blurry, impressionistic, like paintings glimpsed through fog. But they represent a radical shift. The boundary between subjective and observable narrows. Of course, we are far from streaming your dreams onto a screen in cinematic detail. fMRI machines are enormous, expensive, and hardly bedside devices. And brain signals are noisy, variable, deeply individual. But progress is steady. There's gentle humor in imagining future bedtime disclaimers. Please update your dream privacy settings. For now, you can rest easy. No one is live tweeting your REM cycles. Beyond decoding, AI is also transforming sleep research more broadly. Machine learning models analyze massive sleep datasets from wearables, identifying patterns across millions of nights. They detect subtle correlations between sleep timing, heart rate variability, temperature, and long-term health outcomes. Patterns invisible to small human teams emerge from computational scrutiny. Artificial intelligence can even help diagnose sleep disorders. Algorithms trained on polysomnography data can flag potential sleep apnea events or unusual movement patterns suggestive of restless leg syndrome. In some cases, AI assists clinicians by pre-scoring sleep stages, accelerating analysis. Human sleep, once measured by candlelight and guesswork, is now examined by code. Yet the deeper philosophical question lingers. If your dreams can be partially decoded, does that change how you experience them? Dreams have long been fertile ground for art, religion, and psychology. Sigmund Freud famously proposed that dreams were expressions of unconscious wishes. Later researchers emphasized memory consolidation and emotional processing. Historians still argue whether ancient dream interpretation systems were proto-psychology or primarily cultural storytelling frameworks. AI does not replace those interpretations. It adds another layer, quantitative, probabilistic, detached. You roll slightly in your imagined sleep lab, wires trailing gently. During REM, your amygdala, an emotional hub, often shows heightened activity. That aligns with the intense feelings dreams can carry. Meanwhile, parts of your prefrontal cortex quiet down, loosening logical constraints. Artificial intelligence may map patterns, but it does not yet feel the fear of falling or the joy of flying. And perhaps that distinction matters. There's also research exploring targeted memory reactivation, subtly cueing specific sounds or smells during sleep to influence memory consolidation. In some experiments, participants who learned tasks paired with certain sounds performed better when those sounds were softly replayed during slow-wave sleep. It's not dream control exactly, but it is gentle steering. The ethical implications ripple outward. If technology can shape or decode dreams, who controls that access? Could therapeutic interventions reduce nightmares in trauma survivors? Very likely, and promisingly. Could commercial interests someday attempt to influence dream content? The idea feels dystopian. But historians still argue whether every transformative technology first appears unsettling before integrating responsibly. For now, the science remains careful, deliberate. You breathe slowly, imagining your own dreams unfolding beyond observation. A childhood memory merges with a city skyline. A conversation bends into surreal architecture. I could label fragments, perhaps, but it cannot yet inhabit the narrative the way you do. Human sleep may be entering a new phase not only environmentally and socially, but epistemologically. For the first time, The private theater of REM is being studied with tools powerful enough to glimpse its structure. The veil thins slightly. And yet, even as algorithms analyze neural oscillations, the essential mystery persists. Why this story? Why this symbol? Why this emotional tone tonight? Three light jokes drift through your half-dreaming mind. Somewhere, a scientist is probably training a neural network to recognize being late for an exam dreams. Somewhere else, an AI is deeply confused by your ability to sprout wings mid-argument. And somewhere in Silicon Valley, someone has absolutely pitched a Dream Analytics Pro subscription model. But here in your darkened room, none of that intrudes. The fan hums softly. Your brain cycles through its ancient stages. REM arrives and recedes on schedule, older than any server farm. Artificial intelligence may peer gently into the architecture of sleep, but the experience itself remains profoundly human. You are still the dreamer. And for now, that is enough. Now the air itself begins to change. You lie in bed on a summer night that feels just a little warmer than you remember from childhood. The sheets cling slightly. The pillow holds heat. You flip it over in search of the cool side, humanity's oldest form of climate control. Outside, the air conditioner units hum an uneven chorus across the neighborhood. Temperature is one of the most powerful and often overlooked regulators of sleep. Your circadian rhythm doesn't just orchestrate hormones, it also coordinates body temperature. In the evening, your core temperature naturally drops by about 1 degree Celsius. That decline signals readiness for sleep. It's why a cool bedroom, typically around 16 to 19 degrees Celsius, 60 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit, is associated with better sleep quality in many studies. When the environment stays too warm, your body struggles to shed heat and sleep can fragment. Now layer climate change onto that delicate system. Mainstream climate research shows that global average temperatures have risen significantly since the late 19th century, with the past decade among the warmest on record. Nights in many regions are warming faster than days. That detail matters. A hot afternoon is uncomfortable. A hot night interferes directly with sleep physiology. Large-scale studies analyzing billions of sleep measurements from wearable devices across countries have found that higher nighttime temperatures correlate with shorter sleep duration. On average, people lose measurable minutes of sleep per degree of warming. It sounds small at first, perhaps 10 or 15 minutes, but multiplied across populations and repeated over months, the impact accumulates. Historians still argue whether earlier warm periods in human history significantly disrupted sleep or whether pre-industrial lifestyles, with more outdoor living and adaptive architecture, mitigated some effects. Thick stone walls, shaded courtyards, and communal sleeping arrangements may have buffered temperature extremes in ways modern glass and steel buildings do not. You turn on your side, imagining ancient desert dwellers sleeping beneath open skies, heat radiating away into the vastness of night. Compare that to a densely built urban apartment radiating trapped warmth long after sunset. Cities create urban heat islands, where concrete and asphalt absorb daytime heat and release it slowly at night, keeping temperatures elevated. Your biology prefers cool darkness. Increasingly, it gets warm twilight. Here, there's a quirky historical note. Before electric fans and air conditioning became widespread in the 20th century, people used architectural strategies like high ceilings, cross-ventilation, and shaded verandas to manage nighttime heat. In some regions, families slept outdoors during peak summer months. Today, climate-controlled interiors offer relief, but not universally. Access to air conditioning varies widely across socioeconomic lines. And here lies a subtle inequality. Research suggests that sleep loss due to rising temperatures disproportionately affects lower-income populations and older adults, who may have less access to cooling systems. The burden of a warming planet seeps into the bedroom unevenly. Sleep deprivation, even modest, carries cognitive and health consequences. When warmer nights repeatedly trim deep sleep or REM cycles, the effects ripple into mood, productivity, and physical resilience. You shift again, feeling the imagined warmth. During REM sleep, your body's thermoregulation becomes less efficient. You are temporarily more vulnerable to external temperature changes. If the room is too hot, REM can be especially disrupted. It's as if your dreaming brain prefers a stable thermal envelope. There's gentle irony in humanity engineering both the problem and the solution. Burning fossil fuels that warm the planet, then installing air conditioners that consume more energy to cool bedrooms. The cycle hums, much like those units outside. Scientists continue to debate how severe long-term sleep impacts from climate change may become. Some models project that by the end of the century, a global warming could result in substantial aggregate sleep loss worldwide, particularly in tropical regions. Historians still argue whether societies will adapt architecturally and culturally, shifting work hours, redesigning cities, investing in passive cooling, to preserve rest. Human sleep may be entering a new phase not just because of screens and schedules, but because the planet itself is warming beneath you. You imagine future bedrooms designed with circadian and climate science in mind, smart ventilation that cools naturally at night, building materials that dissipate heat efficiently, urban planning that prioritizes tree cover and shade. It sounds futuristic, but in many ways it's a return to principles ancient builders understood intuitively. There's also the emotional dimension. Extreme heat waves can elevate stress and irritability. Studies have linked higher nighttime temperatures to increased reports of restless sleep and even shifts in mood and social behavior. When sleep thins, patience often follows. Three light jokes float through your mind. Somewhere, a meteorologist is apologizing to your REM cycle. Somewhere else, someone is inventing a smart pillow glacier edition. And you, flipping your pillow again, are conducting the oldest thermal experiment known to humanity. But beneath the humor lies a serious truth. Sleep is not isolated from the broader systems you inhabit. It is ecological. The fan hums more urgently now in your imagination. A window cracks open to invite a faint breeze. The air shifts, just slightly cooler. Your body responds almost immediately. Shoulders soften, breath deepens. A core temperature begins its gentle descent. Human sleep evolved under skies where night reliably cooled the earth. As those patterns shift, you adapt through technology, architecture, policy, awareness. The question that lingers in the warm dark is not whether sleep matters. It clearly does. The question is whether you will shape your world in ways that protect it. For now, you seek the cool side of the pillow, grateful for even small gradients of relief. And somewhere inside you, ancient thermoregulatory rhythms continue their patient work, waiting for night to feel like night again. Now leave the planet entirely. You float in microgravity, strapped gently into a sleeping bag tethered to the wall of a spacecraft. Outside the window, Earth glides past in luminous blue arcs. Every 90 minutes, the sun rises and sets again. 16 sunrises in a single 24-hour period. Your circadian rhythm, evolved under one steady solar cycle, blinks in confusion. Spaceflight offers one of the most extreme experiments in human sleep. On the International Space Station, astronauts orbit Earth roughly every hour and a half. Without careful scheduling, their internal clocks would drift chaotically in response to constant light-dark transitions. Mainstream space agencies know this well. NASA carefully controls onboard lighting using timed light exposure to simulate a 24-hour day and help anchor circadian rhythms. Even so, sleep in space is fragile. Studies show that astronauts often sleep fewer than the recommended 7 to 9 hours per night, averaging closer to 6. Contributing factors include microgravity discomfort, ambient noise from life support systems, mission stress, and circadian disruption. Some astronauts use sleep medications during missions, an open acknowledgement that even highly trained individuals struggle when environmental cues destabilize. Historians still argue whether early polar expeditions, with months of continuous daylight or darkness, foreshadowed these circadian challenges. Explorers in the Arctic reported insomnia and mood disturbances during prolonged light exposure, but space amplifies the effect. There is no natural horizon to orient you, only engineered time. You imagine trying to sleep while gently floating, your arms drifting upward unless secured. There's a quirky detail here. In microgravity, fluids shift toward the upper body, causing slight facial puffiness and nasal congestion. Some astronauts describe feeling perpetually stuffy, which can subtly affect comfort and breathing during sleep. No one tells you that when you dream of space as a child. And yet, slow-wave and REM sleep still occur in orbit. The architecture remains, though often compressed. Your brain insists on cycling, even when Earth spins beneath you 16 times a day. Light management becomes critical. Modern spacecraft use adjustable LED systems that shift color temperature, bright, blue-enriched light during scheduled daytime to promote alertness, warmer tones in evening to encourage melatonin release. It's circadian science engineered into aluminum walls. There's gentle humor in the idea that your suprachiasmatic nucleus, that tiny cluster of neurons, is now negotiating with orbital mechanics. Evolution did not include a chapter titled Low Earth Orbit, but space research reveals something profound. Your sleep system is adaptable within limits. When provided with consistent cues, structured schedules, controlled lighting, the circadian rhythm can stabilize even in extreme environments. That lesson matters back on Earth. Shift workers, for instance, face milder but chronic versions of circadian disruption. Nurses, emergency responders, factory employees, millions operate outside typical daylight schedules. Research links long-term rotating night shifts to increased risks of metabolic disorders and cardiovascular disease. Historians still argue whether pre-industrial societies had equivalent large-scale nocturnal labor forces, but nothing matches the modern 24/7 economy. Space agencies treat circadian alignment as mission-critical. Performance, mood, and reaction time in orbit can determine safety. On Earth, you sometimes treat sleep as optional, secondary to deadlines. There's also the psychological dimension. Astronauts describe vivid dreams in space, sometimes shaped by the surreal environment. The mind integrates floating corridors and curved horizons into REM narratives. Even in orbit, your dreaming brain stitches memory and imagination together. Researchers continue studying how microgravity influences sleep stages at a neurophysiological level. Some findings suggest subtle differences in slow-wave distribution, though the data is complex and ongoing. Historians still argue whether humanity's future in space will require genetic adaptation, pharmaceutical assistance, and/or ever more refined environmental engineering to protect sleep. Imagine long-duration missions to Mars, months in transit, partial gravity, delayed communication with Earth. Circadian management becomes even more delicate. Martian days are about 24 hours and 39 minutes, close to Earth's but not identical. That extra 39 minutes, day after day, would gently tug at your internal clock. It's astonishing, really. You evolved under one star, and now you carry its rhythm into orbit and beyond. Back in your bedroom, gravity holds you comfortably against the mattress. The sun will rise once tomorrow, not 16 times. You have the luxury of a stable planetary cycle. Human sleep may be entering a new phase technologically and socially, but space reminds you that the foundation remains cosmic. Your circadian rhythm is calibrated to a rotating sphere bathed in predictable light. When you disrupt that pattern, whether through shift work, screens, or orbital flight, you feel it. 3 light jokes drift by. Somewhere, an astronaut is gently drifting into REM while strapped to a wall. Somewhere else, mission control is dimming the lights for bedtime like the world's most expensive nightlight. And your suprachiasmatic nucleus, blissfully unaware of rocket science, just wants a consistent sunrise. The fan hums in your grounded room. The ceiling remains reassuringly still. Outside, Earth rotates at its familiar pace. You close your eyes, grateful for one sunrise per day. And in that quiet gratitude, your ancient clock continues ticking. Steady, terrestrial, patient. Now bring it back down from orbit and into the fluorescent glow of an office at 3 p.m., where someone is fighting to keep their eyes open during a meeting about quarterly projections. Sleep is not just biological, it is economic. You feel it in the way productivity dips after a short night. The slight delay in reaction time, the extra cup of coffee, multiply that across millions of people, and the numbers become startling. Economists have attempted to quantify the cost of insufficient sleep, and the figures are not small. A widely cited analysis by RAND Europe estimated that sleep deprivation costs the U.S. economy hundreds of billions of dollars annually in lost productivity, healthcare expenses, and accidents. Similar patterns appear in other industrialized nations. When workers are chronically sleep-deprived, the absenteeism increases, errors multiply, healthcare utilization rises. Historians still argue whether earlier agrarian or pre-industrial societies experienced comparable productivity losses due to poor sleep, or whether seasonal rhythms and communal living buffered some of these effects. But what feels distinct now is scale. Entire economies run on synchronized schedules that assume alert, consistent performance. And yet, surveys repeatedly show that a significant portion of adults sleep less than the recommended 7 hours per night. There's a gentle absurdity in praising hustle culture while quietly absorbing the costs of exhaustion. You celebrate the entrepreneur who works until 2 a.m., then lament burnout statistics. You admire the medical resident who powers through a 24-hour shift, then analyze medical error rates. When mainstream research confirms that sleep deprivation impairs cognitive performance in ways comparable to alcohol intoxication. After about 17 to 19 hours awake, performance on certain tasks can resemble that of someone with a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05%. Extend wakefulness further, and impairment deepens. You would never encourage intoxicated driving, yet you sometimes normalize severely sleep-deprived commuting. The economics extend beyond productivity. Healthcare costs linked to sleep disorders, insomnia, sleep apnea, circadian rhythm disorders, add financial strain to individuals and systems. Untreated sleep apnea, for example, increases risk of hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic dysfunction. Continuous positive airway pressure, CPAP devices, may not be glamorous, but they are economically and medically significant. There's also the workplace culture component. In some industries, long hours are a badge of honor. Emails sent at midnight subtly signal dedication. The phrase "sleep is for the weak" lingers in corners of corporate mythology. Historians still argue whether similar moral judgments about rest existed in earlier eras, perhaps framed as diligence versus sloth, but modern connectivity amplifies the expectation of constant availability. You imagine a different model. What if adequate sleep were treated as infrastructure, as foundational as roads or broadband? Schools aligning with adolescent chronotypes, shift schedules designed with circadian science in mind, workplaces encouraging predictable hours and discouraging after-midnight messaging. Some companies have begun experimenting with fatigue risk management systems, particularly in industries like aviation and transportation. Airlines, for instance, regulate pilot duty hours to reduce fatigue-related errors. It's not purely altruistic, it's risk mitigation. Sleep becomes a safety protocol. There's a quirky anecdote from corporate history. In the early 20th century, Henry Ford famously reduced factory workdays from 9 hours to 8 and doubled wages, partly to improve productivity and reduce turnover. While not specifically about sleep, it reflected recognition that human limits matter. Exhausted workers are not efficient workers. And yet, the digital economy complicates boundaries. Remote work blurs office hours. Global teams span time zones. A message sent from Tokyo at noon may arrive in New York at midnight. Yet the 24-hour marketplace hums continuously. Human sleep may be entering a new phase economically, caught between biological necessity and globalized competition. Researchers continue to debate how much of reported sleep loss stems from voluntary lifestyle choices versus structural demands. Historians still argue whether industrial capitalism fundamentally reshaped human rest or merely intensified pre-existing trade-offs between labor and leisure. You lie in the dark, imagining spreadsheets recalculating under the soft glow of laptops. Somewhere, a truck driver pushes through drowsiness. Somewhere else, a surgeon finishes a long shift. The consequences of fatigue are rarely dramatic at first. They accumulate quietly. Missed details, slower reflexes, mood volatility. There's also an emerging countercurrent. Wellness programs emphasize rest. High-performing athletes prioritize sleep as rigorously as training. CEOs publicly discuss bedtime routines. Sleep, once dismissed as idle time, rebrands as performance enhancement. 3 light jokes drift through your half-awake mind. Somewhere, an economist is trying to calculate the GDP of a nap. Somewhere else, a manager is drafting an email about work-life balance at 11:58 p.m. And you, considering turning off notifications, are conducting your own microeconomic reform. The fan hums steadily. Your body, indifferent to quarterly earnings, prepares for slow-wave descent. The economic argument for sleep is persuasive, but you don't need a cost-benefit analysis to justify rest. Your neurons require it. Your immune cells expect it. Your emotional circuits depend on it. If society is to evolve into a new phase of human sleep, economics will play a role. Incentives shape behavior. Policies shape schedules. But beneath all the models and projections lies a simple truth. A well-rested human is more resilient, more attentive, more creative. You close your eyes and let the invisible marketplace fade. Tonight, your most valuable investment is unconsciousness, and it pays dividends in ways no spreadsheet can fully capture. Now step back even further, past factories, past smartphones, past orbital stations, and look at yourself as a species shaped by a very different world. The evolutionary mismatch hypothesis suggests that many modern health challenges arise because your body's evolved under conditions dramatically unlike those you now inhabit. Your genes were sculpted in environments without electric light, without climate control, without 24-hour supermarkets. For most of human history, nights were dark, days were bright, food was inconsistent, and activity was constant. Sleep, in that ancestral setting, made sense. You imagine yourself on a savanna tens of thousands of years ago. As the sun sets, temperatures drop, social bonds tighten around a shared fire. Someone keeps light watch while others descend into deeper sleep. There are no emails, no alarms, no glowing billboards. Darkness acts as both boundary and signal. Mainstream anthropological studies of present-day hunter-gatherer groups, such as the Hadza, the San, and the Tsimane, have revealed something intriguing. On average, these groups often sleep between 6 and 7 hours per night, not dramatically more than many people in industrial societies. That surprises you. And the romantic notion of 9 or 10 blissful ancestral hours isn't universally supported. But here's the nuance. Their sleep timing aligns closely with natural light and temperature cycles. They tend to fall asleep several hours after sunset and wake near sunrise. Artificial light exposure is minimal. Social jet lag is rare because communal schedules align. Historians still argue whether these modern groups perfectly reflect Paleolithic sleep patterns, but they offer a living window into pre-industrial rhythms. So perhaps the mismatch is not purely about duration. It may be about consistency, light exposure, and environmental cues. In ancestral environments, morning light was intense and unavoidable. Today, you might wake in a dim room and stare at a softly glowing screen instead of stepping into sunlight. At night, one ancestral darkness was deep. Today, it is perforated by LEDs and street lamps. There's also the element of safety. Some evolutionary theories propose that fragmented or lighter sleep may have been adaptive in dangerous environments. The Sentinel hypothesis suggests that in group settings, at least one individual was lightly awake at any given time, providing vigilance. Sleep studies in certain small-scale societies have found staggered patterns that support this idea. If that's true, your occasional nighttime awakening may not be a flaw but an echo. Historians still argue whether the mismatched narrative oversimplifies human adaptability. After all, humans are remarkably flexible. You have colonized deserts, tundras, and megacities. You adjust behaviorally faster than genes can mutate. But adaptation has limits. Artificial light is a particularly powerful evolutionary novelty. For most of your lineage, nighttime illumination rarely exceeded firelight intensity. Now, even a modestly lit living room can outshine a full moon by orders of magnitude. Your circadian system, exquisitely sensitive to light-dark contrast, encounters a flattened gradient. There's gentle humor in imagining your Paleolithic ancestor visiting a modern apartment. They would likely marvel at refrigeration and plumbing before noticing that it's midnight and the room is as bright as late afternoon. Why, they might ask, shielding their eyes. Are you summoning the sun indoors? And then there's food timing. In ancestral contexts, meals likely clustered during daylight hours. Today, late-night snacking under blue light is common. Emerging research suggests that eating late at night can disrupt metabolic rhythms, as peripheral clocks in organs like the liver and pancreas become misaligned with the central circadian pacemaker. Your body prefers temporal coordination. Midnight pizza tests that preference. The evolutionary mismatch lens doesn't demand that you abandon modern life. It simply highlights friction points. Light at night, inconsistent schedules, sedentary evenings, chronic stress untethered from physical exertion. Each nudges your sleep slightly out of alignment. Human sleep may be entering a new phase because your environment has changed faster than your genes. But evolution is ongoing. There's speculation, still largely theoretical, about whether populations might gradually adapt genetically to shorter sleep in highly illuminated societies. Yet such changes would unfold over many generations, and selection pressures would need to be consistent and strong. For now, cultural adaptation outpaces biological change. Three light jokes drift by. Somewhere, a caveman is complaining about your Wi-Fi signal. Somewhere else, a circadian gene is sighing dramatically under LED glare. And you, lying comfortably on a memory foam mattress, are contemplating mammoths while adjusting your thermostat. The fan hums softly. You breathe in cool air. The evolutionary story is not one of doom, but of awareness. You are not doomed by mismatch. You are informed by it. Morning light remains powerful. Darkness still signals rest. Regularity stabilizes rhythms. Social connection soothes vigilance. You can't rewind to the savannah, but you can reintroduce elements your biology expects. To step outside in the morning, dim lights at night, eat earlier when possible, keep schedules consistent. These are not revolutionary biohacks. They are ancient alignments. Historians still argue whether future centuries will see this era as one of temporary circadian chaos before a recalibrated equilibrium. Perhaps urban design will incorporate darker nights. Perhaps work culture will soften around biological diversity. For now, you exist in the in-between. Your genes whisper old instructions. Your devices whisper new ones. Human sleep stands at that intersection, ancient circuitry negotiating modern light. And as you settle deeper into your pillow, you sense that adaptation is not about conquering biology, it's about remembering it. So the question rises gently in the dark. Are you actually changing? Not just culturally, and not just behaviorally, but biologically. Human sleep has never been static. Anthropologists have documented variation across climates, latitudes, and social systems. Some groups nap regularly, others consolidate sleep. Some co-sleep across generations. Others prize solitude. Flexibility is part of your design, but flexibility is not the same as transformation. There are rare genetic variants that affect sleep duration. One of the most studied involves a mutation in the DEC2 gene associated with natural short sleep. Individuals with this mutation can function well on around 6 hours per night without obvious impairment. It's real, but extremely uncommon. The existence of such mutations sometimes fuels the fantasy that humanity is evolving toward shorter sleep. Historians still argue whether modern selective pressures, long work hours, to constant connectivity could gradually favor genes associated with reduced sleep need. But evolution requires differential reproductive success across generations. At the moment, being sleep-deprived is not exactly a romantic advantage. More plausibly, you are witnessing cultural evolution outpacing genetic change. Chronotypes, the tendency to be a morning lark or night owl, are partially heritable. Studies suggest that genetic variation influences circadian timing. In industrial societies where artificial light extends evenings, later chronotypes may find more compatible niches, creative industries, remote work, flexible schedules. Whether this subtly shifts population distributions over centuries remains speculative. Human sleep may be entering a new phase not because your genes are rapidly mutating, but because your environment is amplifying certain traits. Consider adolescence again. Given flexible schedules during the pandemic, many drifted later. Adults working remotely sometimes shifted their sleep timing closer to natural preferences. When constraints loosen, biology expresses itself more clearly. There's also emerging research into epigenetics, the way environmental factors influence gene expression without altering DNA sequences. Chronic sleep deprivation can affect metabolic pathways and inflammatory responses. Some scientists explore whether long-term environmental pressures might leave epigenetic marks across generations. Historians still argue whether such changes meaningfully alter sleep architecture over time, but the conversation is active. You roll onto your back, contemplating centuries instead of tomorrow morning. Urbanization, electrification, globalization, each reshape the human night. Now artificial intelligence, climate change, and remote work add new layers. The pace of change is accelerating, and yet, across all of it, certain constants persist. You still cycle through REM and slow-wave sleep. You still experience circadian dips in the early morning. You still require sufficient total sleep to function optimally. No app update has replaced delta waves. There's gentle humor in imagining future anthropologists analyzing your era. Early 21st century humans, they might say, attempted to negotiate with melatonin using LED settings. The footnotes will be fascinating, but beneath the jokes lies a serious possibility: adaptation through design. Perhaps the new phase of human sleep will not be genetic, but architectural. Smarter cities that reduce light pollution, work policies aligned with chronotype diversity, schools starting later for adolescents, smart homes that gradually dim and cool in sync with circadian science. You are capable of reshaping your environment faster than evolution can reshape you. Historians still argue whether societies typically respond to biological evidence with meaningful structural change, or whether economic momentum overrides it. But awareness is growing. Sleep research has moved from niche laboratories into mainstream conversation. You track it, you discuss it, you consider it. That matters. 3 light jokes drift across your mind. Somewhere, a gene is wondering why you keep blaming it for Netflix. Somewhere else, a future historian is writing, they had blackout curtains, and yet, you, considering turning off one more light, are participating in microevolution by choice rather than mutation. The fan hums steadily. Your breathing deepens. Human sleep is not vanishing. It is negotiating. Perhaps the new phase is not shorter or longer, but more intentional. Less dictated by accident, more shaped by evidence. A phase where you understand your circadian biology well enough to design around it rather than against it. Adaptation does not always require DNA to change. Sometimes it requires awareness to spread. And you, lying here in the dim, are part of that spread. You close your eyes and sense both continuity and change. Ancient rhythms, modern context. Not a replacement of sleep, but a recalibration. The night is still yours. The question is how you will choose to inhabit it. And now you arrive at the edge of tomorrow's night. Not the night you inherited, not the night your grandparents knew, but the one slowly taking shape around you. Imagine your bedroom a decade from now. The lights don't simply switch off. They fade in gradual gradients that mirror sunset, shifting from bright blue enriched white in the afternoon to warm amber as evening deepens. Your windows tint automatically after dusk, reducing outside glare while preserving the sense of darkness. The thermostat lowers by a single quiet degree as your core temperature begins its natural descent. This isn't science fiction. Much of it already exists. Smart lighting systems can synchronize with circadian rhythms. Wearables can detect subtle shifts in heart rate variability and suggest earlier wind-down times. Some researchers are developing closed-loop sleep technologies that deliver gentle auditory tones timed to enhance slow-wave oscillations. In controlled laboratory settings, precisely timed pink noise, soft rhythmic sound, has been shown to amplify deep sleep waves and improve memory consolidation. Historians still argue whether these interventions represent genuine alignment with biology or a technologically mediated crutch for environments that remain fundamentally misaligned. Are you restoring natural patterns or compensating for artificial disruption? Perhaps both. You picture cities dimming more thoughtfully at night, streetlights shielded downward, warmer in tone, urban planners incorporating dark corridors for both human and ecological benefit. Office cultures shifting toward flexible start times based on chronotype data. Schools designed with adolescent circadian science in mind. Human sleep may be entering a new phase of intentional design. There is also biofeedback integration. Imagine a mattress that subtly adjusts firmness based on sleep stage, or bedroom air systems that optimize oxygen and humidity through the night. AI could detect patterns of insomnia and suggest behavioral adjustments before chronic problems take root. There's a gentle humor in imagining your bed sending you a polite notification. You appear mildly stressed. May I recommend chamomile and existential acceptance? But beneath the jokes lies a serious possibility: sleep as proactive healthcare rather than reactive repair, where researchers are exploring pharmacological agents that enhance specific sleep stages without disrupting architecture. Others investigate non-invasive brain stimulation techniques to gently entrain slow-wave activity. The hope is not to eliminate sleep, but to deepen and protect it. Historians still argue whether pharmacological optimization of sleep risks commodifying rest in new ways, turning it into yet another performance metric. Will you feel pressured to upgrade your sleep as you upgrade software? Or will these tools remain optional supports? The future could bend either way. And then there is cultural evolution. For centuries, rest was often framed as idleness, unless justified by illness or religion. Today, conversations around burnout and mental health increasingly validate sleep as foundational. As athletes treat it as training, executives discuss it publicly, teen advocates push for later school starts, climate architects consider nighttime cooling in city design. A shift is underway, not dramatic, not universal, but noticeable. You lie in the present moment, sensing that you stand in a transitional era. Behind you, firelight, factory whistles, incandescent bulbs, glowing screens. Ahead, circadian-aware architecture, adaptive work schedules, planetary climate challenges. What remains constant is the rhythm inside you. You still cycle through light sleep, deep sleep, REM. You still require darkness and consistency. You still wake more easily at certain hours than others. No innovation has erased those truths. Three light jokes drift softly across the edge of consciousness. Somewhere, why a future historian is labeling this period the Great Blue Light Negotiation. Somewhere else, an engineer is trying to patent a sunset subscription service, and you, considering dimming one last lamp, are already participating in the next phase. The fan hums gently. Your room is dim. The future of human sleep is not predetermined. It will be shaped by design choices, policy decisions, cultural values, and small nightly habits. It will reflect whether you treat rest as expendable or essential. Perhaps the new phase is not about sleeping less or more. Perhaps it is about sleeping wisely, reintroducing contrast between day and night, aligning schedules with biology where possible, designing technology that supports rather than overrides circadian rhythms, cooling cities, dimming skies, respecting adolescence, our valuing recovery. You don't need to wait for sweeping reforms to begin. Tonight you have already dimmed the lights. You have listened to the hum of your own physiology. You have remembered that sleep is not weakness, but renewal. Human sleep is not disappearing. It is adapting, sometimes clumsily, sometimes intelligently. And you, here in the dark, are both subject and shaper of that adaptation. The lights fade a little further, your breathing slows. Ancient genes and modern tools reach a quiet truce for the evening. Outside, the world glows in its restless brilliance. Inside, you choose night. In this final stretch, let everything soften. The concepts dissolve into sensation. The history quiets. The debates fade into gentle background hum. There is no factory whistle here. No satellite map, no wearable score. Only breath and darkness. Feel the weight of your body supported completely. The mattress holds you without demand. The air brushes your skin in small, cooling currents. Your jaw loosens. Your shoulders sink. If the future of human sleep is still unfolding, it does not require your vigilance tonight. It can wait until morning light. For now, you return to something older than industry and newer than invention. The simple act of letting go. Your thoughts lengthen like shadows at dusk, stretching, thinning, dissolving. Any remaining questions drift like distant stars, visible, but far away. You are allowed to rest inside uncertainty. You are allowed to sleep inside progress. The fan hums one steady note. Darkness gathers gently around you. And whatever phase humanity enters next, it will begin again tomorrow, after you have closed your eyes and surrendered to the quiet intelligence within.